Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside Government for the spring 2024 semester here at Cayuga Community College. This is a show that is put on Spectrum, Verizon Fios, ARMA, the Auburn Regional Media Access, as well as played on WIN 89.1, the college's radio station. I'm your host, Guy Cosentino. On Tuesday, June 25th, is primary day across New York State for those seeking their party's designation if they are running against someone, whether it's for Congress, the New York State Senate, or the New York State Assembly. And candidates have filed their petitions about 3 weeks ago to get on the ballot, and I know that review process is still going on. But of those candidates who have submitted a petition, we have Caleb Slater, a Republican, in our studio today. He would like to be the Republican nomination in the 48th Senate District, which is now represented by Rachel May, a Democrat, and it includes all of Cayuga County. Both Mr. Slater and his Republican opponent, Fannie Villarreal, I hope I'm saying her name right, were invited to come into the studio to be asked questions by Robert Harding, the political reporter of The Citizen. Only Mr. Slater responded to the invitation as of 8 o'clock this morning, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. And as our past rules that we've been using since 2006, if one candidate agrees to appear and their opponent or opponents don't, that candidate is given a half hour of one-on-one time with me. Over the next half hour, we will ask Mr. Slater some questions about the campaign, about what issues are important to him and what he's running on. Just for the record, he is a 2016 student of Cayuga Community College. Welcome to the studio. Nice to have you here.
It's nice to be back in the telecom studio. I want to thank you for your time, Guy. I also want to take a moment and thank the students in the booth working on this production here today. It was 10 years ago that I was in that same seat working on this show, and it's amazing how life goes full circle. But most importantly, I want to thank the voters of Cayuga and Onondaga County who have taken time out of their busy schedules to watch this program and be informed on the options that are on the ballot for them this year.
All right, well, thank you, and let's thank you for thanking the students because they're a key to the success of this program. I want to ask you the Roger Mudd question, and that was what he asked Edward Kennedy back in 1980 or 1979. Why are you running for the Senate?
I'm running for the New York State Senate because our freedoms are under attack. My family came to this country legally July 4th, 1970 from my father's side of the family, my mother's side of the family. My grandfather was a civil rights advocate and fighter and a World War II veteran. They came here, like many people did, seeking freedom. When we look at New York now, leading in the nation for high taxation, leading in the nation for outward migration, going continually up and up and up when it comes to certain levels of crime, people are not happy with both the way that New York is being run, and they're not happy with the status quo, and it's about time somebody makes a change.
Where did your parents immigrate, or your father's family immigrate from in 1970?
Dominican Republic.
Okay. And when did you make the decision to run?
I made the decision to run shortly after the 2022 election. I looked at how close the neighboring Senate district was, District 50. I also looked at the results of District 48 with the understanding that I'm someone who has lived in each unique area of this Senate district, meaning I grew up in a rural farm town, no different than most of the towns in Cayuga County. Dundee, New York.
Dundee, okay.
I'm a student of Auburn, former Auburn Community College, now Cayuga Community College. 10 years ago, I enrolled here. 8 years ago, I graduated from here.
And where'd you go after that?
I finished at Ithaca College.
What was your degree in?
My degree was in the communication school, television and radio broadcasting.
We're shocked at that, so okay.
Yes.
So when did you declare that you were a candidate for the 48th?
So that would have been last year in 2023. What I decided to do is something non-conventional. Whereas a lot of candidates, they know they're going to run, they wait until the last minute to throw their hat in the race. I knew that this was something that I was going to do, so I filed very early, and I spent last year getting to understand the district.
So I want to ask a couple questions about process before we go back to your bio in a second. So what normally happens, and I know in the last 5 to 10 years it's sped up because of some quote-unquote reforms at the state level, the political season starts earlier. So you go to Republican committees. There is a Republican committee for Onondaga County, a Republican committee for Cayuga County, same with the, I'm assuming, the conservative parties. you are endorsed by the Cayuga County Republican Party, correct?
That is correct.
And we should say this district includes all of Cayuga County. There's only one senator now, where it's been split among either 2 or 3 in the past, but going back to the 80s, this is one senator. It's currently Rachel May.
That is correct.
Okay. Did Fanny Villarreal oppose you in the Cayuga endorsement, and did she oppose you in the Onondaga, and what was the result of the Onondaga?
She sought the endorsement of the Republican as well as conservative committees in both Cayuga and Onondaga counties. She won only the Onondaga County Republican endorsement. I won the remaining 3. I think part of the concern was, at least for Cayuga, was the fact that she doesn't have an understanding of this county. I'll share one story and then move on to the next question. Right before the endorsement of the Cayuga County Conservative Committee, she was in the hallway asking a member of that committee, who were the top employers in Cayuga County? Now, whether you're liberal, conservative, libertarian, progressive, whatever it may be, if you want to be the representative for a district that covers all of Cayuga County and you haven't done the preliminary research as to who the top employers are, that's an automatic disqualifier.
So you've gotten the Conservative Party nomination.
Yep.
Is that a state nomination, or is that by each of the counties?
So typically what the process is that the counties do their vetting of the candidates, they hold an endorsement, and then there is what is called a Wilson Pakula, which means that the state executive committee traditionally rubber stamps the decision made on the locals. There have been some instances in the past where they haven't done that, but I'm not a representative of the conservative committee, so I don't feel comfortable saying that.
So you are on the conservative line. Is she on the conservative line?
She is not on the conservative line.
And what is always, it's not necessarily as often on the Democratic side with the working families. If you don't receive the GOP nomination in June, will you withdraw from the race even though you're on the conservative line?
We are in this to win this, and we are running all the way till November.
Okay. So I want to go back a little bit to what I didn't cover in your bio, where you grew up. We talked about that. Where do you live now?
I live in Eastwood in the city of Syracuse.
And how long have you lived there?
I've lived there for, let's see here, it's April now, so roughly a year.
Are you self-employed? Do you have an employer?
That is a great question. I have a combination of the two.
Okay.
Okay, so I have both my own LLC that I operate. I also
It's
have...
a limited liability corporation, for those who don't know. We don't use acronyms, as you know, or may remember.
That is correct. A limited liability corporation. I own my own business in which we buy, invest, and uphold different properties.
Okay.
I'm
mainly in the Syracuse area?
Mainly in the Syracuse area. I am handling the management aspect of those properties, one of which that I am in Eastwood, I am an owner-occupant of. So anything relating to the upkeep or maintenance of the property or tenant selection process, that is what I oversee.
And do you are you employed elsewhere as well?
Yes, I am employed elsewhere as well. I have a variety of 1099 work that I do, seasonal work, whether it's telecommunications work, phone banking, email.
So you're not a
crafting.
full-time employee of another corporation or company?
That actually recently changed.
Oh.
Recently, within the last several weeks, because of a dry season. Unfortunately, anyone watching at home who runs their own businesses, whether it may be accounting, whether it may be landscaping, whatever it may be, you realize that sometimes things change in the economy. And my biggest client last month lost 60% of their business, and so therefore a lot of their subcontractors, myself included, we cut ties for a temporary period of time. And so I'm a blue-collar worker, just like the people sitting at home. I clock in, I clock out, and I'm actually here on my day off from the work that I do.
So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions about the campaign.
Yes, sir.
Have you and your opponent, Fanny Villarreal, faced off in either a party committee or any other forums?
There have been situations where, whether it's at the party convention for Cayuga Republicans as well as Onondaga Republicans, where we were given an opportunity to give our stump speech, answer some questions from the audience, at least in the case of Cayuga, and then the committee would make their decision in terms of an endorsement.
How did Onondaga County do it?
Can you elaborate on your question?
Well, did Onondaga County Republicans have you both in a room? either together or separately, and did you speak to those committees?
There was both meeting with the individual committees town by town, as well as the large convention that was held at Drivers Village earlier this year.
And I know this is early, and we need to say this, but we're doing it because the college, we graduate in another couple of weeks, right, to everybody in the studio, for those who are moving on. We're doing our forum somewhat early, and petitions were due about a month ago, less than a month ago. Are there other forums planned for both of you as of this time?
I'm sure there will be more coming up. There have been conversations that I've had with various organizations, but as it stands right now, there is nothing on the books today.
So I want to ask you about a press release that both was sent to Robert Harding, who was supposed to ask questions this afternoon if you were both going to be here, and it was sent by the campaign of Ms. Villarreal at 8:02 this morning. This is the first time we had heard from her. In her press release, she said, first time she called you, quote, a fraud and a liar. I've shared the press release with you a few minutes ago when you walked in. Any response to that?
Yes, first of all, I find the statement to be outlandish, and secondly, to be laughable. It is a baseless claim without any substance to it. But what I will say is, if there's anyone in this campaign that is showing themselves to be a fraud and a liar, it would be my opponent. If you could zoom in on this camera one, the first piece of evidence that I have is an instance where Fanny was invited to Kathy Hochul's governor's mansion to discuss diversity, equity, and inclusion, which is a policy that is antithetical to the beliefs that Republican primary voters hold. I've got a few more pieces of evidence here.
I'm asking more so, do you want to respond to her about you?
Yes, so my response to her about me is that this is, hypocrisy is the vice that one pays tribute to, and if one is going to say that there is a hypocrite and a liar in the election, I think it would be the person who's claiming to be fighting against Rachel May, when yet and still here she is with Rachel May and Kathy Hochul marching in downtown Syracuse for Black Lives Matter, as well as different functions.
How long ago was that photo? Now, that'll be the last one we talk about, but how long ago was that photo taken?
Yeah, so this photo was taken fairly recently. I wouldn't say within the last few months, but recently enough that it should be of a concern to voters who are making a decision on June 25th.
So one of the other items that she pointed out in the press release was, and I'll quote this, quote, while he's chasing likes and views in the district, and that's end quote, I'm assuming this is a reference to your social media posts. Would you agree with that?
Chasing likes and views in the district. Well, there's more to that sentence. Would you be willing to finish that
sentence?
Sure,
I don't have a problem with that. But in the district, I'm working to meet neighbors and share our values, end quote, said Fanny. But I want to go back to the issue of likes and views, only because social media has changed the way campaigns run. So I want to ask you, do you think that her reference about likes and views is about, in the district, is about social media?
I think that the statement that is made by my opponent is once again out of touch with reality and laughable and outlandish. And I'll give you an example. When it came to petitioning cycle, I collected over 400 signatures going door to door, meeting with constituents in both counties all across the district. Meanwhile, she says that she was working to meet with neighbors that share our values. She didn't even collect 20 for her own campaign. So if she didn't collect 20 and I collected over 400, I think the voters know who's hitting the ground and hitting the pavement, meeting with voters in this district.
So I want to go to petitions in just a second, but let's finish up with social media, because I do think this is a way campaigns have changed. I've been doing this for a little bit.
Yes, sir.
And so when I was involved in government, we didn't have the internet back then, so that tells you how old I am. But now social media seems to be a standard component of campaigns. So how are you using it? How do you use social media?
Mr. Gazzantino, I'm so glad that you asked the question, and I'm glad to be able to share some of the experience that I've gained as a media student, both in this lovely facility at Cayuga Community College, go Spartans, as well as at my time at Ithaca College. Let me be perfectly clear. Social media is a tool. It is not an end-all of-all tool. There are many candidates who think if I just put out a bunch of videos and put up a bunch of posts and throw $100 behind it, I'm going to win the election. No, that's not accurate at all. You should use it as a means of being able to get your message out there. We've created graphics. We've been able to get a lot of people to like our page on Facebook. But make no mistake, this is a grassroots campaign. I have met with voters in every single town within this district and both cities.
So I wanted to ask about process, because you just said you had circulated petitions, you got 4. How many are required? Is it still 1,000 for?
1,000.
1,000. So how many did you gather? Not you personally, but your campaign.
Over 1,600.
And so I'm assuming you went door to door. I know you've been as I understand it, you have been going door to door in Auburn. I don't know if you were doing petitions at that particular time, but you've been doing door to door.
That is correct.
And so this is weird because usually when it's a local election, and it's odd to me about some of the stuff that's been changed in the state setup, the petition challenging is still going on, correct, right now? People can have filed objections, correct?
As far as I'm aware, but I'm not an election attorney. That is not something I specialize in.
Have any challenges been made to your petitions?
I have not been made aware of any petitions challenges.
Because I know people can go to court in Board of Elections next week. Have you made any challenges?
I'm not going to do that. We're going to win this election through grassroots efforts, meeting with voters door to door and understanding the issues that are important to them.
So you didn't challenge anything on that. Okay, so I want to also, oddly enough, we're talking about primary, but the opponent you would like to run against is Rachel May. So let's talk a little bit about her.
Sure.
And let me make it clear to our viewers. We invited her earlier in the month. The state budget was late, and the end result is she had to cancel. She was invited for this Thursday, and because the President of the United States is coming for Micron, her campaign has told us, not her campaign, I'm sorry, her official office has told us that she cannot appear this week. And we end our normal season on Thursday, going into forums. I want to say that just for the record. I want to ask you about specific, why did you choose to run against Rachel May?
Well, I think that she seems to conveniently have an excuse for why she's not willing to get her face in front of the voters time and time again. You presented 2 examples, but I hear this all over the place.
But she did have a public meeting here about a month ago about the budget here on the college campus.
And you know what? That's okay that she did that budget hearing. That's great that she did that. But let me tell you the common criticism that I hear about Rachel May. It's not about policy. The most common criticism that I hear about this senator is that she doesn't answer phone calls, she doesn't answer emails. I can tell you that for example, the Highway Superintendents Association went up to Albany to have a meeting with her. And when they went to her office, she ran out the door. And I've seen case after case after case of this happening. That's disqualifying in my opinion.
Is that the specific reason you're running, or is there some other policy-related reason you're running against her?
That's an excellent question, and it's not that there's any one-size-fits-all reason. I mean, the fact that the representative is not being as apparent and out there with the community, that is one reason. The other reason is that this candidate, in this case representative, does not have as much of a connection with this newly found district.
Though she has opened a constituent office in Auburn, would you do this? Would you keep an Auburn office?
We would maintain an Auburn office.
Full-time or part-time?
We would maintain a full-time Auburn office, and I will remind viewers at home that I'm the only person that's lived in Syracuse, Auburn, and a rural Finger Lakes small town.
I want to go back to Senator May for a second. Is there anything that you agree that she works on that you agree with her policy stance that stands out?
Well, broken clocks are right twice a day, and there was an incident where I actually saw Senator May at a labor rights event for the union that was helping the workers at TCG Player, now owned by eBay. I mentioned earlier that I'm more of a blue-collar Republican, and I see a lot of benefits, especially in the private sector, that unionization efforts have. And so there's an example where Senator May and I agree. But when it comes to energy, when it comes to crime, when it comes to public safety, when it comes to the economy, and when it comes to being in front of the people, we have strong disagreements.
Are you a union member?
I am not currently a union member with the position that I am in today.
Okay. So I want to ask you, we're going to get into specific issues and less than what I would call a lightning round. We'll get a little into depth on that.
Sure.
But I do want to ask you, this weekend, the New York State Legislature did pass a budget finally, roughly 20 days late. Would you have voted, from what you have read in media reports, and I know they are not as in-depth as they may have been in the past, but would you have voted for any of the budget bills as they stand right now, as you've read about them?
As I've read about the budget bills right now, I would not have voted for them. They are bloated and they take too long. And once again, we are multiple days late behind schedule.
Is there, well, on the days late, is it better to have a budget on time or a good budget?
Well, I think that that's an interesting question. And the reason why I say that it's an interesting question is that it's not like our senators don't know we have an annual budget that's due every single year. This is not the only instance where we have senators waiting until the last minute. It is very common practice that at the end of every legislative session, you have our senators and assemblymen working until 5, 6 o'clock in the morning nonstop because they're pushing legislation through that they've had all session to do. So I find that to be very
So you think they should
concerning.
be able to do both, do a right budget and do it on time?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive.
So let's go back. Is there anything in the budget that you have read about that you do like?
I would like to get back to you on that question.
Okay, so let me ask you about a question that's specific to Auburn, and that has been this issue of foundation aid. Jeff Parazola, the superintendent of schools, was here the other day, and this is, I think I have now interviewed him with great exaggeration 30,000 times, and foundation aid always comes up as an issue. Auburn has claimed that they are not getting their fair share on foundation aid. Do you know enough about foundation aid to chime in, but more importantly, do you agree that the foundation aid formula needs to be corrected?
I want to speak, since we're talking about the budget and specific clauses, what I want to do instead of getting in the weeds of each individual clause, I want to speak more broadly here. And what do I mean by that? I mean, when it comes to education, we are spending a lot of money on administration. I mean, there was a diversity, equity, and inclusion official that was being paid 6 figures in the Auburn Central School District. That I find to be very concerning. So when I look at what the costs are of education, I want to make sure that what we're spending our money on instead of administration is going towards types of things that are going to improve both the scores, the performance, and the ability for students to function.
Is there anything that you would like to see included in the budget, an annual budget for New York? Are there, so for example, some people have campaigned on the premise that you want to have local preference for whether it's employment or purchasing. There's all types of small items that you might want to include in a budget. Have you heard from people you've talked to, whether it's door to door or at these meetings you've mentioned, where you would like to have items included in the fiscal package of the state of New York?
I think one of the things that Cayuga County specifically has been in need of for a very long time is an inpatient mental health center. If you look at the fact that the #1 cause of death for people under the age of 40 right now is accidental drug overdoses, and #2, that is suicide. I mean, you look at the numbers that are coming from the Cayuga County that is tracking the amount of overdoses. We have 79% of those people are under the age of 44. So what I would like to see are the mental health services, not just in Onondaga County, not just in New York, but this is something that is frequently brought to my attention. Cayuga County, we really need to improve those.
And we will have Monica Selvage of the HEAL program will be here on Thursday, and we'll be talking to her a little bit about that. I do want to ask you a couple of questions on issues real quickly because we've got about 5-6 minutes left. What is your position on abortion and a woman's right to choose?
I think that's an excellent question that you asked, and one of the problems that we're running into in the society is that people are constantly talking about the supply and not the demand. And what do I mean by that? When I look at a state like New York, where abortion has been legal since 1970, I want to address the fact that poverty, according to the Guttmacher Institute, is the #1 reason why a woman considers an abortion. So whether you are pro-life or you are pro-choice, being able to address poverty, a place like Syracuse, #2 in the nation for childhood poverty, is going to decrease the demand for abortion. You look at the fact that according to the RAINN organization, over 80%
No, but
of...
my question to you
Yes.
is, so obviously the court has made a decision recently. It is now going to be reflected in states. We have seen some states take some stands in recent weeks, and it may come before the legislature. I personally don't think it will come before the legislature because your leaders have to agree to that. Would you vote for an abortion ban? And if you would, for how long? If you wouldn't vote against it, tell us that.
So again, what I'm going to speak on the fact is that I stand for the most vulnerable amongst us. I am a pro-life candidate. What does that mean? That does not just mean the issue of abortion. We constantly want to shoehorn issues into just a tiny little soundbite. But there's also the fact that you got a lot of people who are on death row for the death penalty and then come to find out they were innocent years later. I'm consistent on this issue. I am not in favor of that. You got people right now in places like Canada who are being given euthanasia, oftentimes because there's someone who is going to be the head of the estate who wants to get the money in the will sooner. So when I say, and I'm sorry to cut you off here, when I say that I'm protecting the life of the innocent, I'm not just talking about the issue of abortion. That's where everyone constantly puts their head towards. I'm talking about looking at the death penalty. I'm talking about let's look at euthanasia. I'm talking about let's look at all of these issues and say, how can we address the underlying causes of each and every single one of these conversations?
I want to move on. You mentioned death penalty. I want to ask you about the SAFE Act, which deals with gun rights in New York. Do you support the SAFE Act as it currently stands? And if not, what changes would you make?
Well, I think that the SAFE Act is certainly a disaster, but the bigger concern that the people in the Second Amendment community are concerned with is the CCIA, the Concealed Carry Improvement Act, which is slowly getting destroyed, or excuse me, picked apart by the courts. There's a couple of provisions in there that were concerning. For starters, you have to be over the age of 21 to purchase a firearm. So you're telling me that someone is able to go into wars, regime change wars, that have no benefit to the American public whatsoever and wield a weapon, but they're not able to follow that same oath, which is to defend the Constitution abroad and domestically right here at home. That's one big concern. There's many other concerns that I have when it comes to the Second Amendment, but I know we only have 4 minutes left.
We have less than that. So would you arm teachers in schools?
So again, that is a overly broad look at the question. Did the person go through proper training? What is that teacher, what is their training like? Do they want to be armed? Do they want to defend themselves? Let's take a comprehensive look at these issues instead of trying to fit it into a 10-second soundbite.
The other question that's come up is bail reform, and that's become a much larger issue in communities, especially upstate. Regarding bail reform as it is commonly termed, do you agree with what is in place, or what would you do to change bail reform?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Cashless bail, discovery reform, raise the age, and now the Clean Slate Act all need to be addressed. But let's focus on cashless bail. While the idea was to make it so that someone stealing a loaf of bread isn't being held for a very, very long time, that's not what we're seeing. What we need to instead be doing, instead of having a blanket removal of people, I mean, we just had somebody who choked a woman in the town of Senate, and he was given a misdemeanor, and he was not properly held the way that he should be. So what we should be doing is holding people based off of what is called the threat to public safety. Do they have a record? Are they involved in a gang?
So should judges be given that discretion?
Local judicial discretion.
Okay. Last set of questions is on Donald Trump, because you are running for the Republican nomination. Do you support Donald Trump for re-election?
So when it comes to the election of 2024, at the end of the day, we've got Donald Trump, we've got Joe Biden, and we also have possibly Robert F. Kennedy going to be running in the state of New York right now. I'm going to take a long look at those candidates, and I can tell you that I will not be voting for Joe Biden in that election. There are things that I like about Trump, but I also think he was terrible on the Second Amendment. He was terrible on COVID by allowing Fauci to keep his job, by pushing for red flag laws. And so I have to really decide, do I want somebody that's compromised on our constitutional rights as much as Donald Trump has?
So he's in a criminal trial right now. If he's convicted, should the National Republican Party find another candidate?
I am not going to speak on the National Republican Party because I don't have any faith in the National Republican Party. You look at Kevin McCarthy, you look at Ronna McDaniel, you look at a lot of the times where we have these people in Washington, D.C. with the FISA courts, you look at the spending to Ukraine, you look at the spending to foreign wars. What we need to be doing is reforming the party from within, and that starts locally.
So last two questions. Do you think Joe Biden won the election in 2020?
There has never been a valid election in the history of the United States of America. And what do I mean by that? I mean that there are people that are upset with the system of the Electoral College. There are people that are upset with the influence that big money has on elections.
But
there are
under
people
the rules of the law of what is it currently was in place in 2020, either he did win the election. Do you believe he won the election fairly, or he did not win the election?
Joe Biden is president of the United States. That is not something that I'm going to deny. But here is what I will not allow this program to end without being stated. Americans are sick and tired of the special interest groups, the big donor class, all of the PACs that are buying out politicians left and right. If we're going to sit here and say that it's a fair system in Congress, in state Senate, in U.S. Senate, in anything, then we are denying the fact that there are influencers in our politics.
And I'm not saying that, but I want to ask about election integrity because Assemblyman Lamondis was here and he questioned it a couple weeks ago. Do you believe that New York's election process is solid?
Do I believe that New York's election process is solid?
Yes. Board of Election process for getting votes, having people vote, counting votes, and reporting out results.
Well, we spent the first 5 minutes of the program talking about a process to get an endorsement from a party that most voters watching at home have never even heard of, a Republican committee or a Democratic committee. So the very fact that there are ways to get on the ballot that people don't even know about. You got to get 1,000 signatures as a Democrat or Republican, 3,000 as an independent. The cards are stacked against the third-party candidates. The Libertarians don't even have party access anymore. So when I look at New York State, I look at the fact that Kathy Hochul made the word independent illegal. That's not a fair system. So there are many ways that we can point to the special interest groups and many others that the elections in New York and elsewhere are not fair for anyone, especially independents.
I want to thank Caleb Slater for the last half hour for sharing your views on the campaign for the 48th Senate District. You're seeking the Republican nomination in the primary that is in June, and you will be invited as the conservative candidate, if you're still on the ballot, which we assume you will be, for this fall when we have Robert Harding in the studio to ask the questions of the candidates. We want to thank you for your time. And we do want to say for the record, both Mr. Slater and his opponent, Fanny Villarreal, were invited to participate in a forum where the questions would be from Robert Harding, the political reporter for The Citizen. Ms. Villarreal did not respond until this morning at 8:02, where she indicated that she would not be participating. But as a rule that we have had here since 2006, if one candidate agrees to participate and another one does not, that does not deprive the candidate that responds of time. They get a one-on-one interview. And we hope to do the same with Sarah Clee Hood, who will be is running against Brandon Williams for Congress in the 22nd District. We hope to bring her to you on Thursday. We had also hoped to bring Rachel May to the studio as well. This was a rescheduled interview. The first one was canceled because of the state budget running late, and now she is unable to come because President Biden will be in Syracuse. But we did want to make sure that was on the record for that. We'll be back in just a moment with Connor O'Donnell, the principal at Tyburn Academy, with two of his students, junior Mary McGinn and sophomore Isaac Sabo, who will be in to talk about Tyburn as well as a recent trip they took to Italy. On Thursday, as I mentioned, with Sarah Clee Hood, we'll hope to have her in here, but we'll also have Monica Selvage, the project director of the Healing Cayuga program, to talk about their effort to reduce overdose in Cayuga County. We'll be back then in 2 weeks after that with the Auburn Enlarged School Board Forum. Robert Harding will be asking the questions. I'll moderate, and that is set for Tuesday, May 7th. In the meantime, if you have thoughts or ideas for questions or guests for the future, you can send them to cozguytho@aol.com. I'm Guy Cosentino for Cayuga Community College. Stick around for an interesting discussion on Tyburn Academy. Come through a lot.